Hello and welcome to the podcast Anxiety My Friend with me, Raquel Coelho. I feel a little bit like Adrienne Mischler today with my laptop here because I've made these tiny notes as an introduction to the wonderful conversation I had with Jorge Branco, which I'll tell you all about right now. But first, just to remind you that I lovingly create each episode as an educator for you, dear listener, and also for myself, because I believe in the power of learning and actioning what we learn to change ourselves and to change the world. It's true. It sounds cliche, and it's true. Looking at my notes here, today we will have the pleasure of hearing Branco Explorer. Jorge Branco is a first-generation American born to Portuguese immigrants who was raised in New Jersey, USA. George has an insatiable curiosity and an adventurous spirit. That led him down the path in search for a purposeful life. And this first manifested through a travel retreat company where George organized and guided group vacation experiences to bucket list destinations worldwide. He ran his travel community as an NGO and specialized in sharing memories through self-expanding travel, adventures, yoga, meditation, and volunteer projects. Since those nomadic days, George and his wife Marina have settled in his mother country, Portugal, where he now runs a holistic event space in the forest of Sintra. That's where we met. George holds a master in science, in consciousness, spirituality, and transpersonal psychology with a research focus on psychedelic integration. He currently supports individuals one-to-one through psychedelic exploration and transformation. For more info, visit BrancoExplorer.com. He's also on Instagram with the handle Branco Explorer. As usual, any references made during the episode will have links in the show notes so that we don't have to interrupt to give you out URLs and addresses. So sit back and enjoy. Before we dive in, please be sure to hit the follow button and leave a review and a 5-star rating on whatever platform you're using, be it Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or another. Every single review matters. And for me, even if one person finds an episode helpful or useful, it was worth creating this or these for you. Hi, George.
Hello.
Thanks for making the time to create this and in this beautiful space we have here, nature. Is there actually a favorite quick check-in breath exercise that you like to do that we could maybe even start with?
Yeah, we could just check in. We can close our eyes for a few moments just to arrive here in Floresta and take some initial breaths in through your nose and exhale gently, however it feels comfortable for you. Checking in and scanning our bodies on this Monday morning. Listening to the sounds, the birds, the noises all around us, just showing us that life is happening all around us. Yeah, we could just remain present with our breath. Take some breaths in through your nose, gently releasing them out through your mouth or through your nose, and giving your body a little wiggle. I like to stretch my arms above my head.
I like that too. Thank you. Dogs are really good at stretching.
Yeah, she's in the bush.
Joy is rustling in the bush right now. was actually thinking, that reminded me of the sounds that Jason Silva shared a piece, an article he found, I think it was in Nature, about there's only bird song when there's enough safety. And so that there's that effect on us whenever we hear bird song that kind of gives us the message of, okay, you're safe because birds are singing.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah, I thought that was...
I like Jason Silva's words.
I like him too.
He's very poetic.
He is, yeah, in the moment. Yeah. Maybe I'd like to start with micro-activism, because say the podcast is called Anxiety My Friend, Ansiedade Minha Amiga. But more recently, the biggest push that I would like to have is an encouragement that gets people feeling like they do have the power to make some changes. It can be micro changes, it can be tiny little things as small as picking up, some litter you found on the floor instead of just bitching about it. It can be anything that comes around, that is around you. Can be in your home and your family. So just, getting that encouragement of infusing trust, so that people can get out there and make a positive contribution to the world.
Yeah, sustainability comes to mind. Sustainable change is doing the small things every day. Checking with ourselves, our breathing, the birds.
Yeah. And not necessarily being disturbed by it, because that was another thing you said just when we were breathing there at the start, like this plane came by. So, of course, people might think like, oh, the plane.
It's not perfect.
Yeah, it's not perfect. And I was like, no, that is life, and there is a plane going by, and it's just observing. And that's one thing. That's maybe a good segue into psychedelics, because we tend to rush into understanding things and explaining things and judging things. Instead of just observing, when if we remain, like, the easier answer is the quicker answer, but that might not be the best answer or the best choice. So how might psychedelics, for example, help us to observe better instead of judging as much, perhaps?
Again, what comes to mind is like this idea of like transformation, and it doesn't always have to be so radical. On the outside observations, if you've never had a journey, you have a journey, and then your friends or your family are like, you're different, and and perhaps, a lot of people think you have to quit your job and you have to go on a big adventure, and it's a little more subtle than that. I really like to guide my clients in them picking up those subtleties within themselves. And it is about the little micro actions that we can do every day to check into where are we right now. Not where we were yesterday or where we have to go tomorrow, but just what's happening right now.
Yeah, or even where someone else is, because with all the exposure we get to quick, not really information, it's more like images of what other people are doing and where they're going, it can be dangerously tempting to live in that space or live in that person's ideal life that they're sharing, and forget where I am now, what I can do now.
And I think taking psychedelic medicines in certain contexts really help you listen with that ear of what's going on inside, and not looking at social media, and not looking at outside influences, but kind of turning the lens back into yourself. And I think, and I know from personal experience and also supporting others, that that's what the medicines are doing. It's helping us being really aware, expanding our awareness to not only the stuff on the outside, but most importantly, the things on the inside. What are you feeling?
There's no one-size-fits-all, of course, because each person's experience in a different moment, because you even used to work before in travel, right? And you and I can go to the exact same place and have different experiences, of course, but I can go to the exact same place I went to 20 years ago and have a completely different experience now because of the place I'm in. And so I think that's a good reminder, too, of how subtle changes might be and experiences, how unique they are. So you've got a framework that you work with, right? So we're saying not one size fits all, because everybody's different and everybody's in a different place, of course. And how does that framework help people?
In an integration context, I focus with psychedelics because I just, the power of the medicines, but integrating peak experiences in our life is what I really focus on and what my passions are. And the framework is very, I like to describe it as like scaffolding to a building, where it's like you're reconstructing a building, which is your life. And for that construction project to be safe, for it to look beautiful, you need to put scaffolding there.
Love that image.
And the process, the detail is very subjective to you, right? How you integrate experiences is different than how I integrate, but we have scaffolding that are this framework of creating an integral lifestyle, an integral practice. And I oftentimes describe it like we have 5 areas of our life: your physical, your emotional, your spiritual, your interpersonal, and your intellectual. I like to support my clients in creating micro practices, sustainable, consistent practices in each of these areas, but they're different, right? Like physically, we do different things. Maybe me, I need to go into the ocean and spearfish or surf, and perhaps for you, you need to go kickboxing. It's very unique to the individual, and I see that the growth and the transformation of having peak experiences, whether they're psychedelic induced or not, this framework helps you process and translate that experience into your everyday life. It's not about taking psychedelic compounds every weekend. It's how you show up and do these micro experiences, these micro picking up the trash, or having a conversation with your family or your beloved, or whatever it is.
You haven't shared the experience.
Correct. Or just where you are in your life. That experience brought this awareness to you.
Yeah. I love the idea of these 5 areas. Yeah, so with these 5 areas, the physical, mental, emotional, interpersonal, and spiritual areas, of course, I would imagine this as even a picture or a graph. Some people have a lot of physical practices.
Yeah.
And others might have more mental practices, and those can look different for everyone. So do you design these with each person?
Yeah, I support them in figuring out what are the practices that they currently have, which work, and also where are the weaker domains. Because ultimately we want to be balanced, right? That's kind of dealing with a transpersonal perspective into growth and transformation is a whole person approach. So we need to stimulate each of these areas. And some people think that they're hitting a block, but I have my yoga practice and I have this and that, but perhaps the interpersonal community domain is actually quite weak. And if you put some of that excess energy from your physical practice into that area, you're going to see yourself more in balance. I like to describe it like going to the gym and having a trainer. You might be focused on always doing your upper body, but it's like you can't forget leg day.
Yeah.
So having a supportive environment that helps kind of process and translate and having these experiences, mainly integrating these experiences into your life, is like having a trainer look at your very unique body and saying, okay, yes, you want to be physically fit, you want to go run on a marathon or run into the forest. We got to work on this because this is a very weak muscle that you didn't even know was weak.
Yeah.
And if you deal with that, all of a sudden the rest of the results you'll get.
Yeah. That actually reminds me that the weaker, the weaker parts that we have, what is the benefit of it for me? Or even say with bad habits, let's say, somebody will have a bad habit and kind of just like keep falling into it, and then it's a cycle because then I feel like, oh, I'm really dumb because I did this and this is not good for me, whatever. So how one practice I find useful is helping people to see what is the benefit, what are they getting out of that negative thing. So I don't know, if I'm binge eating, for example, what's the positive that I'm getting out of that? It might be some immediate kick of pleasure. So do you work with those things too? How can people work through those things that are, they don't want in their lives, but there's a reason why they're there?
Well, that's where psychedelics come in, right? Because they give you that subtle awareness, sometimes not so subtle, but also the subtle awareness. I like to kind of describe this like we have these patterns, and despite us smoking or drinking or whatever it is that we want to change, and it's kind of like this metaphor of our lives are this mountain, And as much as, I snowboard, so I use this metaphor. It's like if you snowboard or ski and you're always going down the same piste, and you're always, as much as you want to go to the right to go explore a new area of the mountain, the groove, the patterning, the conditioning always forces you to go left. When we take psychedelics, what's happening is it's like fresh snowfall on the mountain. And then with the right support and the right practices, you are then creating a new place to explore, a new piste. So psychedelic medicines really help with that, kind of break us. And it's also, in a neurological, it's called neuroplasticity. So you actually have the ability, fresh snowfall, to create a new practice, a new ritual, a new sense of self that's more whole, that's more connected. So, yeah, I see this a lot in my clients where they think, I'm being blocked, I want to do something in my life, or I'm not happy, or whatever it is. And we kind of put it on the psychedelic table. We build this relationship, we prepare for an experience. We have the experience, which is like the fresh snowfall, and then inserting the right practices in your life actually help you break free to go down that new pathway, that new groove. And it's not about being perfect. You might have too many beers one night, or you might want to smoke a cigarette, or it's not about that. It's about the consistent micro actions that you can do every day. Because, again, metaphorically speaking, I like to look at our lives also like a sailboat, where if you turn 1 degree of where the sailboat's going, not after a day, but after a week, after a month, after a year, you're in a totally different place of the world.
Yeah.
Just by 1 degree, one micro adjustment, your life can radically transform.
I love that, and I want to just capture it for a moment, that thought of a tiny change, if you're consistent, can make the world of difference in 5 years and 10 years in your lifetime. So it's always worth it.
Always.
Yeah.
We just get caught up in the instant gratification, and I'm a millennial, so same, like I want it now. I've always had it now, and I can do, now we have the world's knowledge on a phone, and it's like it feels like we need to be in a place that we want it so much faster than it needs to be, because maybe we're also not ready for that yet. So I think it's, this world, this nature, these birds, they have a funny way of also slowing down. Nature is a great teacher in that sense. We've all heard this, right? Like, nature takes its time and everything still gets done. But we have this, like, it has to be now.
Yeah, yeah. And nature lets go, the old leaves will fall and there'll be nothing for a while.
Yeah.
And the plant doesn't die, it just waits through it, and that's beautiful images. I love your images. Actually, now I think of the bridge one, the 25 of April, so I'll definitely share that in the show notes.
Yeah.
Do you want to tell us a little bit about that, because it's about integration, being the bridge?
Yeah, it was my it's a beautiful bridge in Lisbon. I live very nearby it, so I oftentimes walk with my wife on this, on the river road, and it was my muse when I was writing my dissertation, because part of my dissertation process was not only interviewing experts and beginners and how they were integrating their psychedelic journeys in several compounds, but I was having high dose experiences and integrating that into my own life. And I would be walking, doing my practice with my wife, and seeing this beautiful bridge. And I was like, wow, this really is like, that bridge is the transformation bridge. And it has 2 pillars, which one pillar is the support system, the structure, the coach, the mentor, the teacher, the guide, who's supporting that process in your life. And then the other pillar is your integral practices. And the actual roadway is the daily micro, the consistency and sustainable actions that you can do, which is like kind of like navigating traffic.
Yeah, and it goes both ways too,
And
right?
it goes both ways, and you're taking from both ends, which is on one end your everyday state of consciousness, the way we are right now, and on the other end of the bridge your altered state of consciousness that the psychedelic medicines induce. So you're able to traverse back and forth from the content that surfaced from your journey and putting all of that into your practice, which will help it transform, will help it translate and process. And I oftentimes say that the water is consciousness itself. You're traversing consciousness.
That's beautiful. I'd missed that part of the consciousness. I was thinking with the 2 pillars, where would accountability be? Because I think that's a piece that can sometimes really help or deter people too and change?
Having support is really helpful for accountability in the beginning. Ultimately, I'm not trying to make clients dependent on me, right? They need to listen to that own intuition, that accountability to themselves. And it's not about being perfect, but it's about these things that you can do every day, every week, every month, that you're showing up for yourself. So maybe in the beginning, in this initial support structure, I'm helping them be accountable by reminding them the things that they've said, right? I'm not just focused on an experience. I work with clients for months on end. So that relationship, that rapport is being built, that trust. And I like to kind of put their own words back in on the table. And eventually what starts to kind of naturally happen is they become accountable to themselves. Like, do you really want the type of life that you say you want? Do you want to chase the dreams? Do you want the type of relationship in your life? Like, what do you want?
And why, right? And why?
And why? And how are you going to get there? And putting, the psychedelic medicines really help align, like, what's true. It's not what our minds want, but it's what we feel. What is our heart saying?
Yeah.
Can we follow and lead through our heart?
And that's not always an easy choice, is it? Or probably never is an easy choice.
Yeah, the world doesn't work that way.
Yeah, because it's even like the groove of when you're going down a piste. That's just easier to go with the flow.
Comfort zone.
But if at the end of the day you feel tired, you feel sad, or you feel frustrated all the time, and I don't mean, sadness is a bad experience, not. But I'm saying, if you're constantly feeling dragged down and like the whole world is wrong and nothing is right and so on, it is a good point to question, okay, which paths are authentic to me and which paths don't.
What's really happening here?
Yeah, is the whole world wrong? Yeah. And I love that, what you were saying about accountability too, and not wanting people to rely on you. I was a primary teacher for about 20 years, and one of the things that I loved to do, well, I loved working with the kids, but towards the end of each school year, I would always integrate some practices that would make sure that they were excited about what was next, who they were going to meet next. Because I never wanted them to feel like, oh, we're going to, it's all sadness because you won't be our teacher anymore. And I've seen that a lot, unfortunately, and it's almost like celebrated. And that can happen in psychotherapy too, is, you've made all these changes in my life, or you've helped me see these things, which is great. But at the same time, you want to be building people up and getting them to trust themselves and seek help when they need it.
They are the medicine. The answers are already inside of us. So I'm just kind of reminding them that. And facilitating an experience where they can really feel that, experience that. You don't need to look outside of yourself to be happy, to be at peace, to have meaningful relationship. Just listen to the birds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Giving a concert. I read that you used intuitive inquiry when you were doing your research. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that? Because it sounded quite interesting.
Yeah, so it's intuitive inquiry is a transpersonal research methodology, and I chose that to write my dissertation. As I said before, I was not only interviewing people and understanding how they, experts and beginners, were integrating their experiences, but part of the intuitive inquiry is also kind of bringing the research into your own life. So as I was saying, I was doing the research on myself, and that's what I think really created deeper roots in this work. And I definitely recognize the uniqueness of my experiences versus somebody else's, but that the idea of scaffolding does exist. We can have objectivity to integrating peak experiences in our lives. And I guess intuitively, it also felt like that was the research methodology that chose me. I was being supported by supervisors and other peers, and it sounded interesting because it's really about going through your own process as a researcher versus being disassociated from the research. Like, I'm very intimately in the research as well. So it's this like unique blend of science, but also this maybe more transpersonal approach to understanding phenomenology.
That's so interesting too, because I wonder if it's also frowned upon by some, because I'm thinking of, the scientist with with that distance and just observing from the outside,
Yeah.
is a completely different way of doing science too. But suppose in a way it accepts that we are all humans, and as humans, you get to be a part of that research too.
Yeah, and like some of this, like psychedelics or other transpersonal experiences, how could you really understand them if you haven't gone through those experiences yourself? I mean, there's a lot of schools of thought in that context, so it's not to say that like one is better than the other. It's just it was my dissertation,
Yeah.
and I wanted to have these experiences. I had experiences with psychedelics in my undergraduate studies, and it really helped me create the travel company that I ended up leaving the US and traveling all over the world and building this beautiful travel family and community was because of my psychedelic journeys. So I wanted to tap into that again in the present moment after having had 10 years of these experiences. And it just felt like it was the right lens to look at this research. And yeah, looking back now, it was a great decision. And I grew a lot from that research process. And I brought where I currently live into it as well, like the bridge. So yeah, I encourage a lot of students who are wanting to explore these pathways to not be so stuck in it looking a specific way. And that's the cool thing about the transpersonal umbrella, and specifically the program I did. They encourage this exploration versus just the scientific method looking like this. And intuitive inquiry is actually very well recognized. It has a lot of rigor in the academic process, and yeah, it's becoming more and more recognized in the field.
Yeah, I think one thing, it's definitely changing the way we do science. And I always like to think about turtles and how they lay the eggs on one beach, and then all these little hatchlings come out, and most of them die. It's sad, but the ones that survive then travel the world essentially and come back to the exact same spot. And what I like to think is there's no GPS in them. They just follow the magnetic field, I think it is, which is something that I can't feel. I don't know anyone that can feel magnetic fields, but they exist and we accept that. And that's one thing that I find fascinating too, is that accepting our humility, with humility, that there is so much we don't understand. And instead of just trying to put everything neatly into boxes, being a little bit more open to exploring and learning, and just not having all the answers, not just asking the easier questions because we know we can find an answer, but being open to some of the messiness that
and getting out of our head, right? Because we're trying to intellectualize something that's a lived experience that, again, it goes into the body, it goes into the heart, into the intuition, which is where spiritual connection comes through. So, yeah, I think, as you were saying, the turtles, I was also thinking of the salmon. That's like very well known that they always go back. And yeah, it's perhaps you don't feel that yet, but it's a trained muscle. It's just like any other physical muscle or voice or singing. It's like it can be cultivated. And I see that within my own life. I mean, I was allergic to feeling things, and I would disassociate, and that was something that through my tapping into my inner world and growing from these experiences, from psychedelics, from academia, from life, learning and traveling, I started to be able to tap into George's intuition. And it is a trained muscle that I actively work on. So, and it changes. The practice to help me access that changes. The domain slightly changes, but the intention is still the same, is just to keep connecting to myself.
That actually reminds me of, say, altered states of consciousness in general. I'm thinking some people adore running and will do a marathon, and all the descriptions tend to come with some sort of altered state of consciousness at some point. Taking part in a big race. I know that I always feel, I don't do marathons, but still big races with lots of people, or even a big concert. There's this feeling that if you give into it, I'm just wondering about other ways of experiencing altered states of consciousness that people might cultivate as a way of building those muscles, you know, because like you were saying, sometimes we might be shut off certain things because there will be, say, prejudice against the idea of drugs, right? So I'm thinking breath work, for example, is one way.
Yeah, yoga, meditation, running.
Yeah, walking in nature.
I mean, there's thousands and thousands of practices that can help you connect to that. That true you. And that's when clarity comes. That's when you know where you need to go to, you know what the conversations you need to have with the right people. Maybe the business idea comes. That's when you're fully connected. So, yeah, in one way, I'm helping clients find that very unique pathway to themselves. And it does change.
Yep.
But again, it's like kind of stimulating muscle memory. You do it once, you do it twice, eventually the body remembers how to do a push-up.
Yeah. And community too. Did you say that you set up you set up some communities?
Yeah, it's been super medicinal for me in my life to stimulate the interpersonal domain, which is all about relationships and community. And I do integration circles, I'm doing men's circles, and all of those modalities there and just gatherings, they are a way for me to express myself and where I'm at in my life. Because again, I'm human too. I'm going through the same journey. And I'm realizing how important that is for me to truly express what I feel, to listen to others, to see myself in their stories as well, because I also believe that we're not that different. Maybe the details of the story change, but the root wounds, the root sense of discomfort is the same. So it's incredible. It's so therapeutic and medicinal for me in my own journey. So and I like to lead these because I've had that call and I'm listening to that call. So yeah, I'm having fun with it too. We're doing a lot of jam sessions too. A lot of music has been a fun expression, emotional expression for me that I'm listening to. And again, it's not about performing. It's just about connecting with the energy of the circle, of whoever's there. And if all of us do a little sound or say something, then we're coming together and process and translating and growing,
and building something shared too.
Yeah.
And also, building something shared that you let go of too, right? Because if you're not writing down a tune and you're not wanting to create something that is completely new, you create that in the moment, and there will be days, I imagine, that where it's just everything is working. There's this big flow, and then you let it go too.
Yeah, it's energy. So maybe you're not feeling. I've been to integration circles where I'm the one leading it. And I'm tired, it's a Monday night, and I end up leaving, and I share this with the group. I'm like, guys, thank you, because you just gave me so much energy in your sharings. It's inspiring me, giving me a sense of purpose. Like, thank you. It's beautiful. It's not about George or what George knows or what George does. It's again, it's a collective. Yeah. And sometimes I'm a little down and I get lifted up, or sometimes I'm up and I'm lifting those up.
Yeah. There's an image that I love works with relationships, not just intimate relationships, but in general, where, there's the 100% and you never give 50%, I give 50%. That's not how it works, right? Just like you're saying, there might be an evening where you're maybe holding all of the 80% because a lot of people are only bringing in 20 and the other way around.
Yeah.
And it's understanding that fluidity too. Would you say the psychedelics help with accepting that?
I think it may, because we always have to say can and may, because it's again, it's putting too much power on something external, like the mushroom or the MDMA or whatever compound you're using. It's you. So it can give you that connection, that sense of awareness, but you're gonna have to go back to your everyday state of consciousness with some new information and act on it. Do something. So
taking responsibility again goes back to that self-trust, accountability, and that to and fro on the bridge.
As you were saying, the percentage, what came to mind is Brené Brown talks about this within her marriage, which being married and knowing the intimacy of the intricacies of dynamics in the household and when you're up and down. And Brené talks about this approach she has with her husband where, you know, they both have had a day. It's like they have to deal with the kids or they have something going on in life that needs attention, and they come together very honest and not attacking and say, listen, I'm at 20% right now. Like, can you just be a little bit more compassionate with me? Like, I've had a day, I'm struggling, my mom's dying, whatever it is that's going on. And I kind of really vibed with that.
Yeah. I saw it there too, actually.
So psychedelics can help us find that vocabulary to express ourselves, and not from an intellectual way only, but also from a feeling heart space. Like, man, this integration circle, I'm tired today.
Yeah.
My body hurts. I got some bad news that I'm still kind of processing. Like, you know, like, this is where I'm at.
And in relationships, like you said, I might, you know, get home and feel like, look, I've only got 40%. And my husband might go, actually, I've only got 30. And even accepting that, no, tonight's not going to be a night of 100%. We're not going to be the best, you know, couple, parents,
I'm going to let this
whatever.
one go.
Yeah.
You should have took out the trash yesterday, but you know what? I'm not going to give you shit because I know you're at 40%. I'm at 30. We'll take it out tomorrow.
Yeah. And that is so applicable to other spheres of life, for sure.
Yeah. Being gentle with ourselves and others.
Yeah.
Because we're all just trying to figure it out.
Absolutely, yeah. Is there a question that you wish people would ask more?
I would say, you know, I try to live my life with as much depth and connection as possible. And I too forget nature, spirit, whatever we want to call it. I also forget. I also forget who I am all the time. So my practices help remind me. And I guess if there's a question that I ask myself that I seek in friendships, that they ask themselves as well, is like, you know, what's the type of life that you really want to live?
That's a big bug. It sounds
That's a drone.
Is it a drone?
Yeah. Somebody's droning the key.
Okay, yeah, hello.
I would say that's the question I ask myself all the time. It's like, what do I really want? Because I too get caught up in the material, in the comparison. You know, again, this is a lot of that energy. I think it really comes from the mind. And that's part of the reason why I always ask myself, like, what are you feeling in this? Like, what do you want? Let me close my eyes. Let me check in. What do I feel in this moment? What's alive in me right now? Not what I think should be alive, not where I think I should be, but like, where am I?
Yeah.
What's happening here? And I guess to answer your question, it would be kind of posing that same question onto you and to others, and for them to check in without all the noise. Because the world in 2024 in contemporary context has a lot of noise.
Absolutely.
And a lot of distractions that pull us away from, what am I feeling? What type of life do I want?
Yeah.
You know? What's the impact I want to make on others? I'm a big advocate on creating impact on others helps create purpose in your life, at least for me.
Yeah. That's funny because there's a book I'm writing. I'll say this because then it creates more accountability, because then I have to really write it, which is about self-help meeting activism. So learning how to help ourselves.
The social impact. Yeah. There's this really amazing, I don't know if it's a video meme, I don't know what you call it, but it's like, you know, there's two lighters, and one of the lighters gets dunked in water, in a glass of water, and then it tries to like spark, but it can't because it got wet. And the fresh lighter, the one that's lit up, the one that has all the energy, was maybe working at 95%, 100%, turns itself on, and it gives gas to the other one, and then the other one turns on.
Yeah.
And it's a great way of, I think, encapsulating this idea of social impact and creating impact on others. Also gives it to yourself.
Yeah. And seeking help too. right? Because you just, like you said earlier, you just don't know what others are going through. And sometimes when you ask for help, you'll get it.
Yeah.
And you might just even end up helping or sparking something else in someone else.
Yeah, I know I wouldn't be in the position I am today doing anything of what I'm doing now if it wasn't for my own teachers, therapists, coaches, mentors. That's why one of the pillars in integrating life is to have support, a support pillar, whether it be a coach, a therapist, a mentor, a teacher, a guide. Again, these are all just labels, but somebody that you can connect to, that can help you
And see you.
yeah, and see you and just like put it all on the table. And that will work. Your innate wisdom inside of yourself, your healing capacity will work itself out. And that's what the medicines help us experience, to feel, to see.
What would you say to people, thinking of the medicines, to people who haven't done any of these medicines and are afraid of them? Because let's say I read in, there's a book that the Association Space, the Portuguese Association, wrote. And in there, I remember they say something like tobacco and alcohol have, it's not even worded like this because it's much worse, but it's something along the lines of alcohol and tobacco have a much greater negative impact in your health than psychedelics. And yet, tobacco and alcohol are readily available for everyone. And psychedelics are this
Taboo.
Yes, Joy, you keep us safe.
I would say that the research doesn't lie, and there's so much more research that needs to be done. But thus far, there's been good research that show that these aren't physically addictive, that they help with anxiety and depressions, and if we don't want to be so extreme, they just help you be a better version of yourself and see that and get outside of your mind. But you got to work out some of that stuff that's kind of blocking you a little bit. And I would say leaning onto that helps kind of inform. There's amazing, if you're not a research reader, because sometimes it's long and dense, there's documentaries that do a great job of at least giving the parameters of how these have been used for thousands of years in the right context. This isn't new age. So I would say kind of exposing people to that first. If I was having kind of this introductory call with somebody, I would kind of pose it back on them, where it's all of the research aside, is living the way that you're living and feeling what you're feeling worse than perhaps the potential of growing and transforming these areas of your life, of finding deeper meaning and connection to yourself and those around you?
Take more responsibility though, right?
Yeah.
I guess that's maybe the biggest danger, is that you become more uncomfortable with things that you've just been trying to brush away, and then you feel like you have to take action, which is uncomfortable, right?
Well,
So
it's like
that would be the...
It's like a snake shedding skin. It's probably, I'm not a snake, but it's probably not comfortable.
No, they become very fragile too, very vulnerable.
They can't see it's coming until you finally break free. I mean, I have thousands of metaphors. I'm a metaphorical guy. So it's like, again, diamonds. How do you make diamonds? Pressure.
Yeah.
The only way to grow is to kind of break from your comfort zone. I saw that within the travel, in adventuring around the world. I see that within psychedelics and going into the more pain, more sensitive areas of your life. But you can grow from these things, and in the end, you will thank yourself because you've gotten outside of your head. Out of our egos are just so strong, and as soon as you start tapping into more of the heart, you'll be all right.
Yeah.
You're not an idiot. You've made it this far.
Yeah.
You'll survive.
Yeah.
And you have people around you who care about you, I'm sure.
Yeah. It's a good point, really good point. I wonder if culturally there's something about, it's almost a guilt of being too happy, like a Portuguese culture of, it might be the religious side of guilt. We all deserve some punishment because we are all ultimately sinners. So I don't know, I just wonder.
Portuguese.
And the fado, destino. So I just wonder.
Catholicism.
Yeah.
There's a lot there. There's a lot to unpack there. society and cultural influence on yourself, myself, plays a huge role of who you and how you see the world. It's the lens. And we didn't know as children what culture we were per se, and the family we grew up in. And I know I was very influenced by a single Portuguese mom working, immigrating to the U.S. and having to make ends meet, raising two kids, putting them to school, and trying to do the best she could. I definitely absorbed a lot of her influence. So, and she's Portuguese, and her influence came from her parents and growing up on a farm, very poor in Portugal, and again, religion and infused and very ancient, multi-generational impacts and influences. So I think it plays a massive role in how we see the world. That's not a short answer. It's very subjective. Unpacking, but generally speaking, it influences you. We need to, if you grew up in a country at war, it's going to impact how you see life.
Yeah.
What you do for business, if you can create a business. I mean, thousands and thousands of examples, but it plays a huge role. Being Portuguese, it's interesting because I was born in the U.S., so I think like an American. I was educated in the U.S., but I have very deep roots of being Portuguese. It's, both my parents are Portuguese, and I would visit Portugal as a kid and go to the farm to see my grandparents. So like I was very proud to be this hybrid. So I do understand both sides. Also because I think I've explored those sides of myself. So when I speak about Portugal as a country or the Portuguese, or it's not coming so much from a judgmental or like box thinking. It's also like, hey, this is me. This is my experience. Am I different than you? Probably not.
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
Yes and
Probably
no.
not that different.
Yeah, I love that. Being Portuguese, having a similar, my parents are both Portuguese, was born in South Africa. It's very interesting to belong without belonging too. So in South Africa, I was an immigrant kid. In Portugal, I'm also kind of a strange Portuguese. And then I'm married to an Irishman. So I've explored a lot of the belonging, not belonging. And there's a book actually called Belonging, which is beautiful, where the belonging goes back into ourselves. It's not how well connected you are at work or friendships or whatever. You do have to nurture all those, but accepting yourself and belonging to yourself. And say psychedelics as a tool, for example, and there's so many others, will help you with that belonging to yourself and listening to your intuition to show up into the world for yourself and for others.
Yeah, it can.
It can. Thank you.
Yeah.
Just like any tool, just like going for a walk. I mean, there are days where I wake up and I don't feel great and I go for a walk and I feel life becomes better. Nothing's really changed.
Yeah. Something interesting is happening where a bunch of people are coming to Portugal, foreigners, creating businesses, thinking outside the box. And I'm one of those. And when I'm expanding Floresta Encantada to my family's land, and I, on Easter, brought that I want to create a psychedelic wellness center on this land, a place where people can come and really retreat, to truly listen to the birds, to have these experiences, to gather these tools so that they go back out into the world and like a carpenter or a handyman can go impact other lives. And throwing that onto the lunch table, that I wanted to do this in this area was like an uproar. So I find it very entertaining and but again, I'm super connected to myself most of the time, and I feel something, I have a vision for something, and I'm just trying to take my steps forward one at a time in creating that, manifesting that in this material world. And that might challenge other people.
I was going to say, because I was going to throw that into folks out there too, of what ways are the ways in which you can bring that into your world.
Yeah, it's kind of like what we're talking about, this deep conditioning, cultural conditioning.
Yeah.
Like,
and with less judgment. So say I was saying I was a primary teacher for 20 years. And then I took some time off and now I do a load of things. One of them is a celebrant. And again, that was like a really tricky transition in terms of just explaining the narrative, because it was so easy to be a passionate primary teacher, which I was, and a teacher trainer and a coach, but all was in education. And so I really had to battle for a few years with the idea of, is that not a waste of skills, of time, my whole library? And it took me a few years to accept that, no, life is short. You get to try out things, and why limit yourself when you can explore different paths? And some of them will fail, but that's something you just need to accept. I mean, it's better. Is it better to fail and then try different paths, or to
not
just
try,
and just stay
it's like,
stagnant?
which one is worse?
Yeah, which one is worse? Yeah.
Because a lot of people kind of give their opinions, but it's coming from a place of ego and mind. It's not coming from a place of heart.
And separation. Yeah. Thank you, George. That's been a lot of fun.
Yes.
Do you want to share with people how they can get in touch with you if they're curious about your work, if they want to get in touch about the Floresta Encantada, this enchanted forest we're in?
Yeah. I'm on all the channels, Instagram, WhatsApp, websites. Branco Explorer is kind of the handle across most of the channels. Send me a message if you're curious.
I'll put those in the show notes too.
Yeah,
So.
I love talking about this, and again, it brings me so much purpose into my own life to support somebody through their journey. So if that's intuitively feeling like something that you're curious and want to listen to and take that step forward, send me a message.
And if you're feeling huge resistance, feel into that too, right?
Yeah.
Feel into that. Just don't deny anything.
And ask, what type of life am I living, and what type of life do I want? What type of relationships that I want?
Yeah. So thank you. Ciao, ciao.
Bye.
Some of the highlights of this conversation were Jorge Branco likes to explore 5 domains when working with his clients: physical, emotional, spiritual, interpersonal, and intellectual. I loved all the images that he uses throughout the conversation. One of them is of psychedelic experiences, and I quote, like fresh snow on the mountains. Because he likes snowboarding, and he says that when you're snowboarding, fresh snow allows you to explore new paths instead of your usual ones. He's talking about neuroplasticity and the fact that psychedelics may allow you to create a new sense of self. I'll add that even without psychedelics, we need to reinvent ourselves throughout life. In relationships, too. It's so easy to think that the person that we married is the same they were years ago, and instead we need to rediscover them and ask, who are you? Who are you again? Because while we have the luxury of life, we can change and we can lead better lives. We also talked about moving away from the desire for perfection, and this is an ode to that. This intro where I'm kind of reading through my notes is an ode to moving away from perfection. It's more about these consistent micro actions that you can do every day. Just think that you can radically transform your life through tiny, tiny changes that you make consistently. So imagine you turn a tiny bit today and then a tiny bit tomorrow and keep turning. You can see the change potential there is. George compares our need for speed with nature, and he says, and I quote, "We want it so much faster than maybe it needs to be. Nature takes time." What a good reminder. George also talks about the importance of the duo support and practice. So support and practice. Either support through a coach, a mentor, a therapist. That person can support you and help you to develop your practices in everyday life. Essentially, George wants to make himself unemployed. He can be your accountability buddy, but he will ultimately support you in becoming accountable to yourself. Sometimes we might feel confused, constantly stressed, or angry at others. That can actually be a good moment to step back, look at our values, and how they might be aligned or not with our everyday life and our everyday practices. According to George, psychedelics can help with this alignment because you have fewer filters and can feel more clearly into your true self, instead of that outer self that others expect of you. George also talks about how he used intuitive inquiry and transpersonal experiences, things I'd never heard about before. And according to the website positivepsychology.com, and I quote, transpersonal psychology investigates experiences that extend our awareness beyond trans, our individual sense of embodied identity, personal. So it goes beyond ourselves. Such experiences can cause perceptual shifts in our worldview, accompanied by emotions like awe, wonder, joy, and peace. While positive psychology investigates the psychology of well-being, flourishing, and optimal experience, and these are the words of Seligman and I can't say the other surname, in the year 2000, transpersonal psychology seeks to better understand non-ordinary states of consciousness and their role in psychological transformation, healing, and integration. All the notes are in the show notes. My takeaway is the humility of not needing to know all the answers and having some more trust and intuition. This doesn't mean that I also believe we should ignore evidence and objectivity. No. Let's say if I intuitively eat highly processed food all day long and then my cholesterol tests say that my cholesterol is dangerously high, in other words, my intuition and external evidence contradict each other gravely, then I know it's time to call an external force. It'll probably be time to call my doctor and talk it through. Maybe what I think is intuition is actually an old trauma about eating. Who knows? This could be a whole new episode. And in knowing what your intuition is really saying, there are many practices that can help connect with the true you. So experiment. Don't keep doing the same thing over and over and expecting different things or different results. Try something different. It might be psychedelics, it might be running, it might be daily meditation, it might be painting, it might be music jam sessions. Go, find out, let me know. Another thing was that it's easy to live a life that is led by distraction. You do the job you believe you have to do so that you can afford to buy the things you believe you have to buy, so that you can show to the people you believe you have to spend time with. So, be sure to step back every now and then and reassess what you're doing with your life and your time. Whenever you feel helpless and like it's not worth trying, wonder if it's worse to try and fail or to not try at all. I'm going to leave you with a question that George likes to ask his clients, and it's a question that he too revisits for himself. What's the type of life you really want to live? What's the type of life you really want to live? And I'll add, how might you take one step, just one step in that direction? I've come to the end of my notes, so I just want to say thank you for listening to the podcast Anxiety, My Friend with me, Raquel Coelho. Please give us a follow and share with at least 2 people.
This was fun.